On January 23, 2025, President Trump signed an executive order that almost every media outlet called the most pro-crypto policy in American history. Headlines praised it. Crypto influencers celebrated. Twitter erupted. Bitcoin pumped instantly. Everyone said the same thing. Finally, a government that actually supports Bitcoin. Everyone, except the people who actually read the order. Because once you study the legal language, once you understand how governments build strategic reserves, once you compare this order to historical precedents, you realize this isn't what they're telling you. This isn't bullish. This isn't pro-crypto. And it definitely isn't about innovation. This is step one in a multi-stage plan that mirrors something America has done before. Something that happened in 1933, when the government used almost identical language to seize gold from its own citizens, revalue it, and silently erase massive amounts of national debt. Trump's order uses the same framework, the same structure, the same coded wording. And just like in 1933, by the time the public realizes what's happening, it will already be too late. Let's start with what the public saw. The executive order is titled, Strengthening American Leadership in Digital Financial Technology. It sounds positive. It sounds visionary. It sounds like the U.S. finally stepping into the future. And that's exactly how the media framed it. Innovation, competitiveness, modernization. The surface-level narrative was simple. America is embracing Bitcoin, but titles are marketing. Headlines are marketing. Influencers repeating talking points are marketing. The real story is inside the details that nobody bothered to read. Because once you move past the title, the executive order begins to reveal its real purpose. It establishes that digital assets, specifically Bitcoin, are now considered strategic to national economic security. It declares that the federal government will acquire, hold, and manage these digital assets as strategic reserves. Read that again. This order isn't focused on your right to own Bitcoin. It's focused on the government's right to acquire it. While the media celebrates a pro-innovation headline, the actual text quietly builds the foundation for something far more powerful and far more dangerous. Government orders often use reassuring titles. They sound positive, forward-thinking, patriotic. Roosevelt's 1933 order was titled, Forbidding the Hoarding of Gold. Sounds like a simple rule about fairness. It was actually the prelude to the largest wealth seizure in U.S. history. Trump's order follows the same pattern. The title is warm and comforting: American leadership, digital innovation, competitiveness. But the title distracts from the machinery hidden beneath it. The real power is in the operational sections. Inside the order, the government declares digital assets to be strategic national resources. Not technologies, not investments. Resources. The same classification used for petroleum reserves and nation-critical commodities. When the government calls something strategic, history is clear. They seek control of it. They regulate it. They accumulate it. And in times of crisis, they seize it. The title tells you nothing. The wording underneath tells you everything. And the moment the government labels Bitcoin as essential to national security, your ownership becomes secondary to their strategic objectives. Section 1 of the executive order establishes the official U.S. government policy on digital assets. This is where the true intention begins to reveal itself. It states that digital assets are vital to U.S. economic security. That is not casual language. When the government labels something vital, it becomes subject to national security frameworks, emergency powers, and strategic resource management. Then it goes further. It declares that the federal government will acquire, hold, and manage digital assets as strategic reserves. Not regulate, not oversee, acquire, hold, manage. This is the same terminology used when building the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. the same terminology used when managing gold in Fort Knox. Strategic reserves are controlled by the state, not private citizens. This language should be a flashing siren for anyone paying attention. It doesn't say the government supports widespread Bitcoin ownership. It says the government intends to own it. Section 1 quietly shifts the narrative from adoption to acquisition. And acquisition is always step 1 before consolidation and control. Section 2 gives the Treasury Department the authority to build the systems required to hold massive amounts of Bitcoin. This includes custody structures, accounting standards, valuation methodologies, and reporting frameworks. This is not simple bureaucracy. This is industrial-scale infrastructure. The order directs Treasury to create custody solutions specifically designed for strategic reserve holdings. That means multi-billion-dollar cold storage systems, multi-signature access structures, and institutional-grade vaults for digital assets. You don't build this if you plan to hold a symbolic amount. You build this when you intend to accumulate a lot. It also authorizes the Treasury to hold Bitcoin on behalf of the United States government. This is a new power. Previously, agencies held seized Bitcoin temporarily. Now they are being told to hold it strategically, and once the government builds the infrastructure to hold enormous amounts of Bitcoin, it will fill it. Governments do not construct empty vaults. They construct vaults because they intend to fill them. Section 2 is the blueprint for national-level Bitcoin accumulation. Section 3 is where the executive order becomes unmistakably clear. It outlines the 3 channels through which the government will acquire Bitcoin. 1. Seizure from criminal enterprises. This is already happening. The U.S. holds over 210,000 seized Bitcoin from Silk Road, Bitfinex, and various criminal cases. 2. Acceptance as payment for fines, penalties, and settlements. This is new and critical. Government agencies can now accept Bitcoin instead of dollars and retain it for the strategic reserve. 3. Market operations and strategic transactions. This is simply a diplomatic way of saying the government can buy Bitcoin whenever it wishes. But here's what matters most. There is no cap, no limit, no maximum accumulation target listed in the order. In government policy, omission is intentional. It means unlimited authority, unlimited acquisition, unlimited strategic buildup. Section 3 is the quiet beginning of the largest government Bitcoin acquisition program the world has ever seen. Sometimes what a document leaves out is more revealing than what it includes. Trump's executive order never sets limits on how much Bitcoin the government can accumulate. It never defines what qualifies as sufficient reserves. It never restricts acquisition methods. Why? Because limits would constrain future action, and the government never constrains itself when preparing for crisis-level strategies. There is no mention of protecting private Bitcoin ownership. Only lawful holders, a term intentionally left open-ended. There is no mention of market neutrality, only the authority to buy, accept, and seize. There is no mention of transparency, only instructions to develop frameworks. The absence of protective language is the strongest indicator of the government's long-term intentions. They did the same thing in 1933. The gold order never mentioned future confiscation. It simply established gold as a national asset. Then the forced collection began months later. What's missing from Trump's order is the loudest warning of all. To understand why this order is dangerous, you must compare it to the historical event it mirrors. Executive Order 6102. Roosevelt's gold confiscation. That order declared gold essential to economic stability. Trump's order declares Bitcoin vital to economic security. Same framing. Roosevelt granted the Treasury the authority to acquire and hold gold on behalf of the nation. Trump's order grants the Treasury the authority to acquire and hold Bitcoin and digital assets. Same authority. Roosevelt's order did not immediately force citizens to surrender their gold. It created the framework first. Trump's order does the same. Same sequence. History doesn't repeat. It copies and pastes. And just like in 1933, most citizens won't recognize the danger until the government is already holding the majority of the nation's strategic asset, and they're told to turn in the rest. The similarities aren't coincidental, they're deliberate. Because the problem the government faces today is the same problem it faced in 1933, crushing, unpayable national debt. Let's look directly at Roosevelt's 1933 order. It was titled, Forbidding the Hoarding of Gold Coin, Gold Bullion, and Gold Certificates. A title that sounds harmless. But beneath that title, the order declared gold a strategic national asset. It stated that hoarding gold endangered the economy, and it granted the Treasury the authority to acquire and hold gold as required. Sound familiar? It should, because Trump's order uses almost identical language, the same functional structure, the same strategic framing. Roosevelt's order later led to mandatory delivery of gold to Federal Reserve banks. Penalties for non-compliance included fines and prison time, and for 41 years, private gold ownership was effectively illegal. Trump's order doesn't mandate seizure, yet, but it lays the same foundation, the foundation for a future mandate. 6102 was not about gold. It was about control. Trump's order is not about Bitcoin. It's about control. And once you understand how EO 6102 unfolded, Trump's order becomes a warning, not a celebration. Let's map the pattern from 1933 side by side with 2025. Step 1. Declare the asset strategic. Gold, essential to stability. Bitcoin, vital to national security. Step 2. Give the Treasury authority to acquire and hold it. Same language, same power. Step 3. Build the infrastructure for custody and valuation. In 1933, vaults and accounting systems were created. In 2025, digital custody and valuation methodologies are being built. Step 4. Mandatory delivery at official prices. This is the step Trump has not yet executed, but the order prepares the ground for it. Once a government declares something strategic and builds the machinery to hold it, the next step is predictable. Roosevelt followed this exact sequence. Trump's order completes steps 1 through 3, which means step 4 is now structurally possible. And history suggests step 4 always arrives when the debt crisis peaks. Why would the government ever consider confiscating Bitcoin? The answer is brutally simple: debt. The United States owes over $37 trillion. The debt-to-GDP ratio is above 130%. Annual interest payments alone exceed $1.2 trillion. And by 2027, interest is projected to exceed $2 trillion per year. This math is terminal. You cannot raise enough taxes. You cannot cut enough spending. You cannot grow the economy fast enough. There is no politically survivable solution, except the one Roosevelt used, except the one every failing currency system eventually uses: asset revaluation, debt erasure through currency debasement. In 1933, the government confiscated gold at $20.67 per ounce, then revalued it to $35. Overnight, the U.S. erased 40% of its real debt burden. Bitcoin gives them a new lever, a harder asset, a global asset, a politically convenient asset. Debt creates desperation. Desperation creates drastic policy, and this executive order gives them everything they need for the drastic phase. To understand what may happen with Bitcoin, look at exactly what happened with gold. After confiscating gold at $20.67 per ounce, the U.S. government passed the Gold Reserve Act of 1934. This act revalued gold to $35 per ounce, a 69% increase. Two things happened immediately. 1. The government's gold reserves skyrocketed in value. Their $4 billion in gold suddenly became $6.8 billion. 2. The dollar was devalued. Every dollar became worth 40% less relative to gold. That meant every dollar-denominated debt became easier to repay in cheaper, weaker dollars. The government didn't pay off its debt. It reduced it through debasement. And here's the key. The public didn't understand what happened until years later. The wealth transfer was silent, legal, and irreversible. Bitcoin gives the government a far bigger lever. The potential revaluation is far more dramatic. And the debt problem today is far more severe than in 1933. History shows the mechanism. The executive order shows the intention. Now imagine the same mechanism applied to Bitcoin. The government acquires 1 million Bitcoin through seizures, mandatory sales, settlement payments, and market operations. At an average cost of $60,000 per coin, the government invests roughly $60 billion. Then comes revaluation. The government announces an official Bitcoin price of $1 million per coin. A number chosen not for market dynamics, but for balance sheet engineering. $1 million Bitcoin gives the U.S. government a $1 trillion hard asset reserve. At the same time, gold is revalued upward. The combined effect adds $5 to $7 trillion in assets to the government's balance sheet. This is the same move Roosevelt used, on a much larger scale. But here's the critical insight. When the U.S. government declares Bitcoin to be worth $1 million, the market follows. And if Bitcoin goes from $100,000 to $1 million, that isn't Bitcoin rising. That's the dollar collapsing. A 90% collapse in purchasing power, a silent erasure of real debt, a historic transfer of wealth from citizens to the state. Once Bitcoin is revalued, the dollar faces immediate consequences. A Bitcoin price of $1 million implies a 90% devaluation of the dollar relative to hard assets. That means everything priced in dollars explodes upward. Food becomes 5 times more expensive. Energy becomes 5 times more expensive. Housing costs surge. This isn't Bitcoin skyrocketing, it's the dollar imploding. And for the government, that's the point. The national debt remains $37 trillion nominally. But in real terms, adjusted for inflation, it collapses to $3.7 trillion. A 90% reduction in real debt without raising taxes or cutting spending. The same mechanism Roosevelt used, simply scaled to modern economic collapse. This is why the executive order matters. It's not about innovation. It's about preparation for controlled currency devaluation. The people celebrating the order see Bitcoin going up. The people reading the order see the dollar going down. And the people who don't understand the difference are the ones who lose everything. One of the most important but overlooked parts of the executive order is the creation of a multi-agency working group on digital asset markets. This includes Treasury, Commerce, the Attorney General, national security officials, and other high-level agencies. This is not a discussion group. This is an implementation group. Treasury handles acquisition and custody. Justice handles seizure and enforcement. Commerce handles industry coordination and economic impact. National security agencies handle crisis response and emergency powers. This is the exact cross-agency structure required to execute a large-scale strategic asset program. The same architecture used during wartime economic mobilization. The same structure Roosevelt used when coordinating gold policy with the Federal Reserve. Most people ignore this section. Experts don't. Because when these agencies work together, it means something enormous is being prepared. No government creates this level of coordination unless the goal is far bigger than simple crypto innovation. This is the administrative skeleton of a national Bitcoin reserve. Buried inside the executive order is a quiet but explosive clause. The government will establish valuation methodologies for digital assets held as strategic reserves. This sounds technical. It sounds harmless. It is neither. In 1933, this exact authority allowed the government to set the official price of gold. They paid citizens $20.67 per ounce, and then revalued gold to $35. The valuation methodology determined both the confiscation price and the post-confiscation value. The same power is now being built for Bitcoin. The government will have the legal authority to define an official Bitcoin price separate from market price. This official price will be used for confiscation, mandatory sale, balance sheet valuation, strategic reserve accounting. If the official price during confiscation is set at $80,000, while market price is $150,000, you are forced to sell at a massive discount. And after the government holds your Bitcoin, they raise the official price to $1 million. This single clause is the entire playbook. The executive order directs the creation of government-grade digital asset custody. This includes secure storage, multi-signature systems, auditing frameworks, and physical facilities. This is not something built overnight. This takes 12 to 18 months, which means the timeline is not speculative, it's structural. The order was signed in January 2025. The custody infrastructure will be operational by mid-2026. That is when Phase 2 begins. Quiet accumulation. The government will buy through intermediaries. They will seize more Bitcoin. They will accept it as payment. They will build their reserve quietly while the public remains unaware. When custody is ready, accumulation accelerates. When accumulation is complete, policy shifts. When policy shifts, mandates begin. The building of custody systems is the clearest signal of what comes next. You don't build digital Fort Knox for fun. You build it because you plan to fill it. One phrase in the executive order should concern every Bitcoin holder: lawful holders. This is the language lawyers use when they plan future restrictions, because what counts as lawful can be changed at any time. Right now, everyone is lawful, but future regulations could require registration of Bitcoin holdings, licensing to hold above certain thresholds, mandatory reporting, annual audits, fees, or special taxes, government-approved custody. Fail to comply, and you become unlawful. And unlawful assets can be seized. Unlawful holders lose protections. This is the same structure used in 1933. Gold holders were legal, until suddenly they weren't. And once they were labeled hoarders, the government had full authority to take their gold. Lawful today does not mean lawful tomorrow. And once regulation defines who is lawful, confiscation becomes an administrative action, not a dramatic one. This is the quiet trap being set. Here's the timetable the executive order creates. Phase 1, 2025 framework, legal structure, working groups, custody planning, public narrative of innovation. The trap is built while the public celebrates. Phase 2, 2026 infrastructure completed. Quiet accumulation begins. Seizures increase. Agencies accept Bitcoin as payment. Regulations tighten. Compliance becomes harder. Many retail holders sell out of exhaustion. Phase 3, 2027. A. Crisis occurs. Debt ceiling, banking collapse, treasury sell-off, or dollar instability. Emergency powers are activated. Mandatory sales or reporting requirements are introduced. Official price for forced sale is set below market. Non-compliance becomes criminal. Phase 4. Post-confiscation government holds enough Bitcoin to revalue it. Official price is raised dramatically. Dollar is devalued by 70 to 90%. Real debt is erased. Wealth transfers upward. This timeline is not fantasy. It's built directly into the structure of the executive order. If this scenario unfolds, the outcomes are brutally uneven. Winners: the government, which erases trillions in real debt, politicians who avoid fiscal collapse, early Bitcoin holders who self-custody and avoid detection, wealthy insiders with offshore protections, foreign jurisdictions that don't participate in confiscation. Losers: anyone who complies with mandatory sale at discount prices, anyone holding dollars or bonds during the revaluation, middle-class savers whose purchasing power collapses, retirees on fixed income, homeowners with variable rate debt workers whose wages lag behind inflation. Confiscation is not about the Bitcoin itself. It's about transferring wealth and stabilizing the state. And just like 1933, the obedient lose the most. The informed and the prepared lose the least, or even gain. The stakes are absolute. This isn't a policy dispute. It's a generational wealth shift. There are strategic steps individuals can take before the window closes. 1. Move to self-custody. Bitcoin on exchanges can be frozen, seized, or automatically sold on your behalf. Hardware wallets put friction between you and government control. 2. Reduce KYC-linked purchases. Every exchange purchase is logged forever. Consider peer-to-peer buys, ATMs with low verification, or mining where possible. 3. Diversify by jurisdiction. Foreign holdings, trusts, and corporate structures in Bitcoin-friendly countries offer additional protection. 4. Hold other hard assets. Gold, commodities, income-producing real estate, anything outside the collapsing dollar system. 5. Understand enforcement dynamics. The government threatens millions but prosecutes few. The power of confiscation is psychological. 6. Watch the signals. Unrealized gains taxes, self-custody restrictions, mandatory reporting. When these accelerate, the window to reposition is closing. Protection requires action before the crisis, not during it. Let's address the most common objections. Trump supports Bitcoin. Roosevelt supported sound money too, until the crisis forced his hand. Politicians say things. History forces different actions. Bitcoin is decentralized. They can't confiscate it. Exchanges are centralized. Your data is centralized. IRS records are centralized. They don't need your node. They need your name. There would be political backlash. There was backlash in 1933. It didn't matter. Backlash never stops emergency policy. This is a conspiracy. The executive order itself is evidence. The language mirrors 1933. The debt crisis is real. History repeats. Confiscation isn't theoretical. It's historical precedent. And every legal building block is already being constructed. Objections come from hope. Warnings come from pattern recognition. Let's be clear. I'm not saying confiscation will happen tomorrow. I'm not saying Bitcoin is doomed. I'm not saying panic is the answer. I am saying this. The legal framework now exists. The custody infrastructure is being built. The fiscal crisis is unavoidable. The historical parallel is exact. Could the government choose another path? In theory, yes. In practice, no. Cutting spending is political suicide. Raising taxes is political suicide. Allowing default is national suicide. Revaluation is the one option that has worked before, and the only option that fixes the numbers quickly. This video is not financial advice. It is pattern recognition. It is a warning supported by history, mathematics, and legal structure. What you do with that warning is entirely your choice. Here's the truth most people won't face. The executive order is already signed. The machinery is already running. The window for preparation is not infinite. It is shrinking. You have 18 to 36 months, maybe less, to position yourself before the crisis phase begins. That's not fear-mongering. That's a structural timeline baked into the order itself. Most people will ignore this. Most people will trust headlines. Most people will celebrate innovation while the trap closes around them. But a few will see the pattern. A few will understand the stakes. A few will prepare while there is still time. When the letters go out, when assets are frozen, when official prices are announced, when compliance becomes mandatory, the window will slam shut. By then, your choices are gone. Your assets are locked. Your options are limited to obey or be punished. Those who win saw it early. Those who lose saw it too late. The executive order is signed. The timeline is set. The only question left is which side of the line you'll be on.